Welcome to another episode of Creative Leaders Unplugged for Future Skills Academy. I'm Morgan. Woohoo!
Hey, Morgan.
Here with Arna. Hi, Arna.
Hey.
And today we talk to Todd Nilson,
Yeah, very interesting, right?
Commander. What did he call himself? Oh, Adventurer of the High Seas.
Commander of the High Seas. No, that's not something you would say. No, adventurer, dancer of the high seas.
Also,
Yeah, gamer of the high seas.
gamer of the High Seas.
And it's a lot about community building, which is very close to my heart, because bringing people together and seeing the things that people can do and the value it creates. And I think that's such an amazing thing.
Yeah.
And I've been doing that for such a long time, and it's so good to listen to someone who is making is living out of that. It's his job, and which is an awesome thing to do.
And he said some really clever things in very simple, brilliant ways. I was like, oh.
Yeah. And also the diversity, depending on how you look at it, but, from a sort of the lens of what an ordinary, normal life should look like.
I have no idea, to be honest.
Me neither. But I think it the diversity of interests and things that he's pursuing and the things that he likes to do. And, we are exploring creative leadership or the creative mind, or we are we're meeting all these people who have all these different, almost sometimes like incompatible interests or activities, which are actually perfectly kind of connected to each other, and they actually complement each other so much. And right. So, and he's such a great example of that. Every time you ask a question and you dig a little deeper, there's another thing coming up. Like,
that's what I also,
right?
Exactly.
I think there must have
been this.
And I used to be a dancer, really, and I think the sense of there's probably more that we don't even know.
I'm sure.
Right. I like that. I like that very much. It's
layers.
And in a way, aren't we all? Isn't everyone really? I mean, don't we all have layers? And but we just don't make them that explicit, or we don't see the connection, or we don't build on these things. We see, because these are hobbies and they don't mean anything in your kind of your work life. So for instance, we used to do, I still do that every now and then. When there's a workshop, we have people sending in a circle, and just to kind of get like a very, very, the most simplest icebreaker ever. It's basically saying, okay, introduce yourself to your colleagues by sharing something that your colleagues don't know about you. Right. And then often, first of all, people are like, oh, I don't know. But then there's a whole group of people that, besides being the account manager or whatever job title they have, they are musicians, and they love sports, and they do all these other things, right? And that people didn't even know about them, or they do all these kind of charity works or whatever, right? And they don't see that as part of their identity when they are at work. And so when it becomes explicitly part of your identity, you are all of these things, it can also confuse people. Like, what are you? Right. So so what are you then?
I had someone who was we were coworkers, and we were getting to know each other and started to become friends also outside of work. And then that was always like, you are just a box of surprises. I was like, that's nice.
Yeah, that's very funny. That's a weird metaphor. Because because it's literally, it's the opposite of the box. It's not a box. It's actually, it's all these things that are floating around, and sort of, in my mind, it's like this, it's around me, it's there, and I can kind of
Mm.
dive into it if I want to. And sometimes they blend and they mix and they, if it's being a musician or a photographer or an artist or a facilitator or whatever,
Yeah.
right? Theater, all these things have elements where you go like, oh yeah, right. These are all patterns. I think if you become aware of them and you're allowing yourself to see them as everything is, that it all belongs to you, and you can step back and look at them and you can recognize the patterns that they share, it becomes really meaningful. You go like, oh right. And you start recognizing these patterns in other things too, because they're always everywhere the same.
Yeah.
And that kind of allowing yourself, so giving yourself permission to do that, to be kind of a whole person, really.
Yeah.
Um,
A
so I
multi-hyphenated, multi-interest person.
yeah.
If I have to step outside for 30 seconds because I can hear my dog growling at another dog, please hold.
Oh, so I have a dog and it growls and it barks and it's. I'm going to cut this out then, okay? While you're taking care of the dog, because I now I feel quite alone in this podcast all of a sudden. I mean, I did some improv as well because I've done stand-up comedy, which is weird, and part of that was improvisation, and I can recommend that to anyone to do improv. But now I have no idea what to say. So, and I don't want this recording to. I don't want to
Ah,
be.
you were freestyling this whole time.
Yeah, I was talking. Well, I was talking about how I'm not being able to. So I did improv. I did because I've done some theater, some stand-up comedy, and
Yeah.
I was reminded of, oh no, I should improvise something. But, yeah,
Another one of your multi-hyphenates coming into play. Oh
exactly.
yes,
But
I
yeah,
remember this life. Yeah.
I
And
remember
it's
this.
and it's funny because when I'm like speaking of the multi-hyphenate and all these different things, like I tend to wear this one, like today I was a teacher, right? So I was in my teacher hat and I just kind of like adopt this, not a persona, a little bit of persona, but then I'm just like, okay, teacher mode activated. And then I forget that I have these other modes. And then it's also super valuable to bring that to my teaching. So if
Yeah.
anyone has any tips or techniques, please let me know.
But I think although maybe it's not an actual physical hat that you put on or
No.
rather. No, but I mean, in a way, so say a uniform. For instance, a friend of mine, he's with the Amsterdam Police, and a couple of years ago, we did we ran a workshop, a boot camp, and the police was part of that, but they didn't wear their uniform,
Mhm.
right? And because they were just we had the police of Amsterdam being part of this training, innovation training, and but the last day we asked, so this friend of mine, we said, you want to join us at the sort of the end, the last day of the boot camp, and wearing your uniform? And he said, okay, I'll do that.
Mhm.
And he was just a different person, and people responded differently to him as well.
Of
And he
course.
was taller somehow. Yeah, it's really weird. Because he basically, his posture was different,
Yeah,
and because he was he had quite a rank as well, and so it's like,
sure.
ooh,
Yeah, you're in uniform. You
you're
stand
in
up a bit
uniform.
straighter. Yeah.
But so you're different. It works, right? If you are a chef and you wear your chef's outfit, or if you are a captain or a sea captain, or you are a nurse, or it does do something. It is sort of you transition into this role, and I think. And yeah, I think we all kind of do that. I do it well as well. I'll imagine sort of what would a consultant do, like what,
That's a nice tech. I've done that one before.
right.
That's pretty clever. Yeah. Yeah.
How would they do this, and what kind of thing would they, well, would they dress? I would even go as far as that, go like, okay, my wife will tell you that I have like different kind of, it might be subtle sometimes, but I have
Hmm.
different clothes for different roles I play. Now I'm a musician, and
Hmm.
I tend to think about, I want to be in that role, and it's a
Yeah.
role, right? So which I think is good, because you kind of, yeah, because you slip into this specific role, and it helps. And you can imagine, like, okay, what would that person do? How would that person act? Okay, yeah. So yeah, totally. How's your dog?
The dog is staring like straight at the wall and just barking. So that's
Okay.
it's getting kind of windy. Oh, it is pouring rain.
Ah, okay.
That's what's happening.
So the dog is
So the dog is protecting me, which I am
yeah. Watch it.
grateful
Don't go
for.
outside.
And she might not like rainstorms, so.
Okay. All right. So
Sorry. Yes.
we anything else we want to share about this episode?
No, I think, and I think people who also aren't interested maybe in community building themselves should still listen to this because everyone is in some sort of community, right? Your colleagues, your neighborhoods, the earth. Um, and he brings up some really clever things, and yeah, I think it's just a nice, easy, inspiring conversation,
Absolutely.
like most of the other people we find.
Yes, exactly. All right.
Right.
Let's
Yes.
listen to
Enjoy.
First of all, I'm a real person and I'm not a supervillain. I've been accused of being a time traveler, but
Oh,
that's still to be proven. No, so I would say that what they would need to know about me as a person is that I'm genuinely interested in learning people's stories. I was originally trained as a journalist, and I feel like I bring that lens to a lot of the professional work that I do. I'm genuinely interested in people and how I can kind of figure out how to help them to go where they're going to. And I think that that mentality has helped me as someone that helps build communities and connections between people in online spaces as well as in person.
it's interesting. If you're genuinely interested in people's stories, have you always been? I mean, is that because I was kind of reflecting on this? Like, am I really interested in people's story? I think I am, but when do you start saying that about yourself? Like, I
It
am.
goes way back. My dad had a favorite story about me when I was a really little kid. I grew up in Western Pennsylvania,
ah,
and we went on a family vacation up to Lake Erie, which is sort of like the northwestern corner of the state of Pennsylvania. And little area up there called Presque Isle. They had a one of those old tall sailing ships, the USS Niagara, that I think was in service like during the Civil War or something like that. It was probably a recreated version of the ship. But my dad and I went on to the ship to take the tour, and he started, I was a little kid, like, I don't know, 5, 6 years old or something like that, and started walking around the ship, and we saw one of the crewmen, working on the ship. And as a little kid, I just started asking him questions about things. And the guy was so thrilled to be getting
oh,
questions, from a little kid, that he just like took us backstage under the decks, and kind of showed us, things that weren't on the regular tour, piece of it. And I think it's always been kind of part of me. Like I always wonder about things and people and how they got to where they're going. And I don't know if it's from being like an only child and sort of wanting more brothers and sisters, around me, or what, but it's just something in my DNA.
But it's also that you're not shy as a kid, because
yeah.
I remember that I would probably not dare to ask someone questions. I was quite shy, and I would love to know, but I would like, so my mother would, oh, I remember that my mother would then kind of push me forward, like, go ask a question, go ask, and I went,
Yeah.
Mom, don't push me here, I don't want to. So. Right. So it's not just being curious about, and interested in stories, but it's also somehow that you managed, as a kid, to get, to stand up or walk towards someone, or just kind of ask someone a question, which is also something. And I know kids are really good at asking questions in general. I mean, kids are, they're like, they are there was a researcher we worked with years ago, and she did sort of a presentation on questions, and she did this question storm. And the presentation always started with, "Do you know how many questions a kid asks per day?" And it was like hundreds of questions per day, and
Yeah.
compared to adults, and there were like hardly any questions per day. So we lose sort of the ability of asking questions. But so there's something about not being shy, being able to ask. So journalism sounds like a really
Yeah.
good
But
choice.
But it's also funny because I studied journalism. That was my first year.
Huh.
Um, I'm from Ohio, Todd, so I've been to
Oh,
Presque Isle. So yeah, and Lake Erie
awesome.
many times. Yes. So then nice to have a mental image of that again. But I journalism was what I studied my very first year, and I never once thought of it as, oh, I'm really curious about people's stories. And I knew that I was a very curious well, in both senses of the word, I guess. But I knew I knew that I was very curious about things in general. But for me, it was more of a um, like telling a story in the right way and like in a fair and a just way. So that was
Mm.
a bit more my motivation. So then also very interesting to think like, oh yeah, people could be so story driven that they're inspired to become a journalist. So.
Yeah. And as you say that, so my journalism study, I did become very interested in telling sort of a balanced story about a situation or a meeting or,
Mhm.
or whatever the case is. But that was a little more of an afterthought for me. And when I did work professionally as a journalist for a couple of years right out of college. And I will say that I, while I covered like the night shift and, would have to go to fires and accidents and cover city council, news kinds of things, which was interesting and fun. I really did derive the most interest from human interest stories and, going to special events, covering a circus and learning about like, how did you get involved with the circus? Like, wow, that's really cool, and just
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
understanding people's journeys has always been a passion.
So funny. So I've worked as a photographer. I still do some photography work, and my first sort of the job as a photographer, I wanted to be a photojournalist.
Mm.
Ah.
And I've did some work. And so I had there was a moment where I did do something for a local newspaper, and there was a fire. I also did a whole series on the circus. But
Nice.
I have a camera. I don't have to talk to people. I like that idea. I can be there. I can observe, be part of them. But I'm the photographer, so I don't have to kind of engage or talk. So which is it's typically me. My wife will go yeah or no. Yes, I know. It's your. I think you have sort of a. It's not autism, but there's something going on with you. But that idea of being curious. But again, it's also somehow there's a difference between observing and just you know really having conversations with people and daring to ask questions. And so you need a basically for me I need a platform for that. Like I ran a conference so I can invite guests. This podcast for me was like, oh, now I dare to ask questions because it's a podcast. I supposed to.
Yeah.
But just walking up to people on the street, or just kind of because, that to me is a skill, and there's also something about that links probably to empathy, where you kind of, because asking questions is one thing, but really wanting to know about people's stories and their lives, also means that you have to kind of somehow imagine being them a little bit, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, I think that my earlier educational, career was around literature
Mm.
and writing. So very much, what you're saying, that understanding and empathy of others, seeing the world through the eyes of others, I think is I think it's a skill that more people desperately need in this time that we live in, where there's so much selfish and self-involved behavior you know,
Can
the
you learn? Can you learn to have more empathy? Is that something you can?
I think it can be learned unless there's, you know, something chemically wrong with your brain.
Uh,
But
I'm trying
sometimes.
to, I just imagine like an empathy class. Like, okay, I've got calculus and empathy today.
Yeah, well,
well,
it's
so
such a
now,
big topic, right? Sorry, Todd. Yeah, go ahead.
well, I was just gonna say, I remember some research some years ago, and I can't cite this, but I remember something about decreasing recidivism in prisons by having opportunities for inmates to read literature and talk about it, and sort of
Mm.
to sort of develop that muscle of putting yourself in someone else's shoes.
Yeah, isn't it? So I might challenge the sort of the idea of empathy a little bit. Because I think there's a mix that you actually have that allows you to do something that is probably really beyond most people's kind of skill set.
Like a predisposition, you mean?
Well, it's no, it's just that I think that so I've worked with refugees from Syria. And then if you ask me to have empathy for them in the sense that I have to kind of see the world through their eyes, I can't. I cannot imagine what they went through. It's impossible. And it would actually be quite arrogant for me to say, yeah, I know how that must have felt, because I don't. But what I did feel is like empathy is also about allowing them, really listening to, but for me, it was sort of acknowledging that, not that I wasn't and that I couldn't, and that their story was different. So I had to listen to them and I had to let them in. And I had to
Sure,
acknowledge that I didn't, and that I was open for their information. So the cliche of you have to walk a mile in someone's shoes or you have to look through people's eyes often to me feels like, but you have something different or added to this. So you are also someone who you ask questions. You have you're trained in that. You've been a journalist. You've right. So there is this. I ask questions. I listen to stories, and I think the skill plus sort of being interested in genuinely being interested in people's stories. But so what do you think about
I don't know. So I'll say how I took what you said is empathy as appreciation, not appropriation.
yeah.
Um, you know, and I think that there's an important distinction there. I think as appreciation means that you are genuinely trying to understand
Yeah.
and try to have some inkling of what that other person has gone through as a journey, but not having the arrogance of assuming like, oh, I get that, you know, or
Yeah.
what it is.
Thank you.
It's just
So, well,
right,
all right. Thanks for the information. We don't need you anymore. Now I know
right.
exactly how you felt because I think that, and I know my example of working with the refugees is an extreme example, but I know for sure that all three of us see the world in a different way. And it might be because we live sort of in a similar, we live in the same time, we read the news, same news. So it might look like we see the world, through the same lens, but we really don't. We just talked about childhood. Your parents had a huge influence on how you now see the world, right? And how you grew up and all those things. So I think it's also just the acknowledgement of not being able to see the world through other people's eyes and being that makes you vulnerable because that makes you like, oh, I don't know. And we're scared of not knowing. So I think it's an interesting position to have to say, well, I actually don't know. So you have to help me. So I have to work with you. So as a designer, for instance, we can do research and say, oh, thank you. I know. Now I know. Or should I actually keep on talking to you and should I co-create it with you? Should I involve you in the things that I do as much as possible? Because I actually don't know how you see the world, but by working together, we might actually find out, or we come close as possible. So I think that's I know that's a problem with words, obviously, but it's sort of, but I'm always a little bit, and I do believe in empathy, and I do believe it's really important if
And
we
I,
understand it correctly.
I think that's one of like the powers of journalism and great reporting and storytelling as well, as it gives this spotlight and this to people who maybe don't have their stories told all the time, or you might overlook. And I'm sure you've or hopefully you've heard of the account Humans of New York. But it's the street photographer, and he'll just find random people in New York City, and then
Right.
he'll also ask them their story. And these are incredible stories. But it's really like he's not looking for the best story. He'll just talk to anyone on the street, and it's this incredible thing. But
Yeah.
Sure.
yeah, and I think and of course, then a journalist has to kind of help put it in a presentable, coherent way, which is part of the craft of journalism. But then, like, how did you decide, okay, I love people's stories and I love getting to know more about them, but then there's more beyond journalism? Like, what was the siren song that led you away?
Um, uh, I'd have to reply to that. Which one? I just came off of a meeting where we were talking about sort of how it was a professional group that I belong to that is all about other people who also practice the art of community building
Hmm.
in mostly in online spaces, but a mix of the two. But the question was, how did you end up in this career? What was the siren song? But I think I said in the chat, in that meeting, well, I've always characterized my career as an adventure on the high seas. Like it's just sort of like, let's see what island I sail into next, or what adventure is over the horizon. I've had a lot of interest, and I've had a lot of careers. I think since being a journalist, I was going to be an English Renaissance literature professor. I was going to, I spent some time, working as a software trainer. I spent many years as a technical recruiter, and then until I ended up in my my current career space, community building. I sort of previously thought, oh yeah, I found my thing, but like this one feels like the space where I ultimately should be. So maybe that's the question that I should answer. How did I end up in community building? Um, that world called to me, I think, pretty early on, like very late 90s, early 2000s. I found myself attracted to an online role-playing game. Not massively multiplayer, not like Ultima or Worlds of Warcraft or any of those earlier games. I would have never come up for air after that. I have an addictive enough personality that I would have just kept playing those. But this was a little more casual. It was chat based, so very much emphasis on words and pictures in your mind.
Mhm.
Um, but I think what was exciting about it is that it was run. It was run in basically like a live chat setting for the game. I don't know if this is going to date me terribly, but like old text-based games like Zork. So if you're from the 80s, you'll recognize that, where you basically type in what you want to do, and the environment kind of tells you what happens, or although in this case it's multiplayer, so we could be playing different characters, and I could have interactions with you, you know, via text in the space, and there were some game mechanics in place for it. So it was really neat. It was very immediate. It was very immersive without being visually immersive. It was mentally immersive, and so that was exciting. And then the game was also sort of run and moderated via an old school discussion forum, something called V Bulletin. And then they had data wiki for it. And sort of like this, it was an exposure to all of these new tools that I had not really run into that much previously in my career. And I was a reasonably technology savvy person. I'd been playing with computers since the early 80s. And but really kind of entering this space where it was suddenly these social and collaborative technologies that were available really excited me, because that was at the same time I was starting my career as a tech recruiter. And I immediately saw, like, wow, there's so much potential for people to collaborate more at scale and across distances using these technologies. And that was super exciting to me. It didn't coalesce in my current career all at once, but I would say over that decade, 2000 to 2010, that evolved from me being a recruiter helping people one to one in a lot of cases to find their path, as and find their way in the world, to the next career. to helping people more at scale. And initially that started, it was sort of the kernel of that gaming experience, plus the rise of early social media networks, LinkedIn, Facebook,
Mhm.
Twitter, kind of growing up with those as my career was developing, to the point where I realized that I was pivoting out of recruiting and into community building and social collaboration work. And
Mhm.
so by the time I like 2008, 2009, there was a tech downturn at that point.
Yeah.
There were a lot of people found themselves out of work, and these ideas had been percolating with me for a long time. I headed up a group. I was a founder of a group called Milwaukee Job Camp at the time. I was in Wisconsin, and a lot of people who were out of jobs had not been out of a job for like a decade or
Yeah.
more. And they did not know how to job search. There was this new thing called LinkedIn. They didn't know how to, format a resume for sharing with recruiters. And all that was available to them were job fairs if they weren't lucky enough to get an outplacement program from their employer. And so I, with a group of other HR and recruiting professionals, put together this volunteer run event called Job Camp. And we set it up as more of I'll call it a hybrid unconference. So it was idea driven. So like if somebody had an idea for a presentation or something they wanted to do, they could put it up on the board and they could go attend the event. But we also had a program around things where you could go and get your resume reviewed by a professional recruiter, or you could do a practice interview with someone, or we had banks of computers set up where people could help you set up your LinkedIn profile, and we could do a headshot of you and actually help you upload it right there at the event. Like it was more of a carnival atmosphere where it was designed to help with mindset and heart set more so than a job fair, which is give me your freaking resume and get out of my face.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it was a little transgressive in that way. But we ended up running like three or four of them, and it was totally grassroots, internet based, organically based community building. But it was happening in a live space, and we ended up helping thousands of people, in that process. Well, that for me was a pivotal moment because I realized this is the stuff that I'd rather be doing. I'd rather be
Mm.
building communities and coalitions and groups that were helping each other a lot more. So it was a long-winded story about how I got into the space, but the transition point for me was I ended up moving from a tech firm that I was working with as a recruiter and as a little bit of an intrapreneur. I was trying to start up a consulting unit within that company around. I didn't get quite what it was going to be yet. I was kind of thinking digital strategy overall. But then
Mhm.
I ended up joining in 2013 a company called Seven Summits out of Milwaukee that was specialized in building online communities for brands. And that was the pivot that I needed that kind of put me on my current path and what's very, very likely to be my path for the rest of my working career.
It's interesting how you moved from journalism, being interested in stories, to helping people, right?
Mm.
So there's it's an interesting shift in how you, I think how you position yourself towards others, right? Instead of listening to stories and maybe writing them down to, I can actually help you. Was there sort of, was that a thing that you were aware of? You went like, oh, actually, I have the skills and I can listen and I understand now. I'm understanding, but I can actually use that to help people.
It's interesting. I certainly not highly conscious of it, of that transition. But I think, from my early life, um, and that work as a journalist, actually that came out of, I think, some earlier experiences where um, I was I had a background as a performer in the performing arts. I did work.
Oh,
I was trained as a dancer
oh wow.
originally, and so I from being a little kid, like I would get up and do tap dances in the living room when Fred Astaire or Gene Kelly, were on the screen. I was like, yeah, that's cool. And I would get up and I'd do the dance. My parents took me to dance classes and said, do you like it? And I said, yeah, it's really great. And so like I danced all the way up through probably grad school or more. And did semi-professional local, kind of production, sorts of stuff. But I was trained in tap, jazz, ballet, modern, and sort of
Cool.
that whole performer aspect of things was interesting to me, and it was a way to relate to others through movement, and it was also sort of that esprit de corps, not just dancing myself, but dancing with an ensemble was always incredibly interesting to do. And movement as storytelling was also quite interesting. I think I sort of moved from that performative world where I kind of thought, wow, it'd be really cool just to entertain people and make them happy, to, well, why don't I learn about their stories and,
Right.
kind of help them tell their stories as well. But it was a little bit performative, I think, on my part as well. To then I think moving the direction of getting people into jobs that allowed me to tap into some of those prior experiences and apply that to actually helping people get something to put money in their pocket and a smile on
Yeah.
their face.
It's so
Yeah.
interesting because
Yeah.
because our previous guest was Natalie Nixon, and she's a design leader, but she is a dancer, and so the
Mhm.
whole title of so she writes books about this as well. The connection between the dancing and the connection between dance and creativity. The title of the podcast, and I think also her book is Move, Think, Rest. And so she was very clear on the connection between, the physical and the dancing and the creativity and the connection and connection with yourself,
Yeah.
as well as with others. And obviously it's performing. It is yes, so it's really interesting.
I'd recommend that for
to-
anybody. Like any
Yeah,
child should be at least exposed to performing arts or dance in
yeah,
some fashion, because I think that it really does develop the creative faculty and the ability, for self-expression. And like I look back on it and I kind of chuckle to myself. I had sort of a classical Greek education. I learned, music and poetry and movement and and and
yeah.
I think it's a whole brain development thing, and
Also, yeah.
Oh
having
yeah,
parents that encourage you to explore and try to do
totally.
different things.
Yeah, I think Natalie also said something about embracing vulnerability and imperfection, because she had so for instance, when you have a dance, you can do the dance, you know 10 times, but it's going to be different 10 times. It's never going to
Oh,
be
yeah,
exactly perfect. It's never going to
right.
be that. So you kind of have to let go of this fact that has to be exactly the same every time. And also the vulnerability of it, because of you're totally exposed. And um and but I totally also, for sure, it's about development, brain development. Of course it is.
It's perspective too, because I think I mean you can try to be a perfectionist in that
Sure.
space. I mean I think about like the technical precision of a dancer like Fred Astaire,
Hmm.
uh, who was incredibly well rehearsed and just was always on the spot. And of course, Ginger Rogers, who did everything that Fred Astaire did, but backwards and in heels. This is the joke. Like those kinds of dancers, as perfectionists, are certainly there, but their performances are all a little different when they do. So I don't know. I think that that recognition that every attempt to perform something in the world is going to be
Well, I
its
think
own
it's,
creature.
but it's as
You
an
know?
audience, right? As an audience, you are also. So I'm not going to go through the same story as I shared with Natalie, but so a while ago, I went to to the ballet and classical ballet, French group, and I know ballet. I've seen ballet, but I realized that while sitting in the audience, quite close to the stage, that it was the first time I've actually been seeing it live. I never really, I thought, oh, I've never seen this live on stage. I've seen it on television. I know it's there. I've never really been there. And I was a bit like, what is this? This is really bizarre, because everything was, rehearsed, and it had to be exactly the same. Also, the applause of the audience, like, you're supposed to clap a certain way because they're bowing, because it's the end of the dance. There's a solo, and then the audience claps. That's just part of it. And also kind of, receiving the applause is part of the dance. So you have to applaud, otherwise it's going to be really weird. So
Oh,
that
that'd be
was,
terrible.
yeah, but at the same time, that it's, it's never, it can go wrong. And it's
Yeah.
difficult what they were doing. And so the tension between it's life, it's real, my brain goes to AI right now. It's real. It could go wrong because these are people, and they rehearsed and they trained really hard to do that jump and to that thing. And
Mhm.
so you were like, oh, she made it. Right.
Yeah.
So, so it's also like this, yeah, the tension between, it could go wrong, but it didn't, is an amazing thing. And if it went wrong, it's still, sometimes there were little things that,
Yeah.
wasn't perfect. And people who knew, it was Swan Lake, and people knew exactly what was going to happen because it was the traditional thing. And so they
Mhm.
knew exactly what they were supposed to do. So they went like, oh, she did it. That was great, because we've seen it 100 times. But it's every time it's slightly different. And it's
Mhm.
so it's
That's
also tension.
Yeah, and I was thinking about that in terms of facilitation as well, right? Like you're facilitating a group and leading all of that, and there's always a bit this tension, right? Like, yeah,
Yeah,
what's
of
going to be
course.
the
Yeah. In
Is it going to
everything we do.
crash and burn, or is it going to
Yeah.
be a phenomenal success? Right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, isn't
Yeah.
that part of the beauty of being human? And so, also with your work in communities, I mean, there's always a sense of, you can't just let it go. I mean, you
No,
need to, right?
Yeah.
So there's this,
there has to be an expression of intentionality
right.
about the spaces that we create. And so, like a lot of my work is helping organizations understand the decisions and the trade-offs that are involved with building a sense of belonging among any kind of, audience or segment or group of people that is going to, you know, resonate, percolate, make them want to come back, make them want to talk to each
Mm.
other. Like there, it's almost like how to host a great party. Like how do you
Yeah.
set the conditions for that? Everybody loves the idea of community building until they're asked to
To
build
do
one.
it.
My gosh, what's involved with this? And then run around with their hair on fire if they've got hair, not like me. But that they want to have they want to have that. Like I think every organization wants that uh that excitement of having a fan base or a group of people that are
Of course.
enthusiastic about their mission or their vision, their values, or the things that they're trying to do. But they're so conditioned about thinking about it as an audience as opposed to
Mm.
people that like a good colleague of mine, Seth Ressler, has the metaphor, for it. Like if you are on a stage and there's seats and people are watching what you're doing, that's an audience and a performance. If you've got your chairs in a circle and they're all facing each other, that's a community. And that's a key difference, that it's got to be many to many connection. It's not about there's one person, elevated above the rest, to do that. And then I would add to that chairs in a circle facing inwards, very tightly locked, and there's one person in the middle. That's still a performance, but that's a cult. Um,
Oh, that's like, I ran a conference for a couple of years, the design thinking conference, and we had the audience sitting in a circle with the speaker in the middle. And at one point we actually did it in a church because we actually started feeling a little bit like a cult. Yeah.
love
So
it.
that's yeah, yeah, that's so cool. So you went through, so if you talk about this, my brain goes to, this is probably the early 90s, I think. No, late 90s, early 2000s, where we started building. So I was at a design firm, and we started creating sort of platforms, or companies like insurance companies. They would have like a platform, and they wanted to have, because there was this thing around, yeah, so that's the 2000s. So the user generated content was sort of emerging, like user generated content. Like we would,
UGC. Yes. Yes.
right, where so we create this platform, and then people started sharing stories, and they become like, our, so that kind of, and that never ever, at least in my my experience, never ever worked, because it was still part of the brand, and you had to go and sign up to this, basically platform by a business. And it was always a bit difficult, because people, maybe they signed up, and maybe they shared a little bit, and then they stopped, and it
Yeah.
just died. And so, if you look at that sort of these platforms and that user generated content, the way we thought about it then, and sort of what has been happening over the years up to now, what do you see as a sort of what is changing? What has changed
Good
in
question.
regards to, the communities and that kind of
Well,
context?
a lot since the time that you're describing, and like how long do we have here to talk about this?
Oh, wow.
uh, so I think that what you're describing is still a problem that some organizations face when they try to do this, and I tell a story around it. I say this is my I don't have a shaggy dog story. I have a woolly mammoth story. The If you think about um, the idea of the woolly mammoth in early Stone Age culture, that you'd have tribal groups that would band together, and there's this huge creature in the neighborhood that is trampling your dogs and your kids, and it's a menace, and it's foul tempered, and like, I don't know if you've ever seen like a skeleton of a
Mhm.
woolly mammoth or mastodon. You could literally walk underneath its belly. It is so huge. It is like intimidatingly large. I've been to the La Brea tar pits and seen some of the, I walked underneath one of these things. They are frighteningly large creatures. And you would have bands of hunters that would get together in the Stone Age, and this is pre-Neolithic, pre-farmer time, and they would, chuck spears at it and kill this thing, and literally like taking this thing out takes out an existential threat, but this is something that would feed the tribe, that would clothe the tribe, that would be building materials for the tribe. And so when you have something like this that becomes so central to the survival and thriving of the tribe, that becomes then, oh well, we're the people of the mammoth, right?
Mm.
That suddenly becomes something you identify, by. Part of the problem with trying to create communities around your insurance plan or
Yeah.
your accounting software is like your survival is not tied to that. It's not actually tied to anything about you. So how do you build a community around that? Well, there is a way, there are ways to do that, such as if you can find a way that the core group of people that use your software or service, if you can find a way to really identify with their lifestyle or something that's central to their identity or their needs that they have. So, for example, if you sell the Swiss Army knife, if you're Vitronox, you're not having a community around, um, you know, this particular model of knife, or your enthusiasm for this penknife. No, you're building a community around the lifestyle of like an active outdoor lifestyle. Like, what is it
Mm.
to go camping? What is it to go hiking, traveling the world? And oh, by the way, I happen to have my handy Swiss Army knife with me as well. You make it about the members and sort of their identity. And so I call it, the woolly mammoth factor, because it's a matter of building something around the core of a person, not things that are peripheral to their interests.
Yeah. And it has to be genuine. because there's
Yeah.
this, it has to be real and it has to be honest and genuine, because you feel that if it's a sales funnel,
Oh,
you
smell
know,
the bullshit a mile away. Yeah,
you
exactly.
know
Right.
this, right? So, and I think
Yeah.
this is the difficult part, because it means that you internally, within the business, you have to kind of convince people, your sales people,
Yeah.
for instance,
Mhm.
that it's not a sales funnel. And they'll
Right.
go like, then why are we doing it?
Yeah.
Because what's the point? We're going to invest so much time and money into this. And so what's the value of having that outdoors kind of
Yeah.
community if we are not able to sell more Swiss knives?
There are good reasons
Tell me.
for many organizations to do it. At the most basic level, a lot of enterprises, that are sales driven organizations want to have this as a means of peer support to deflect help desk tickets. There's
Mm.
dollars and cents around that. There's a financial incentive to have a
Yeah.
space like this where frequently asked questions and power users can jump in and answer questions, for others. And as a power user, I like that because, hey, that kind of, makes me feel good about myself, and it sort of burnishes my professional, personality as well. That's like a base level reason to have this. But you know what else? I might be able to get better ideas for my product or service, from the group here. And then I can
Yeah.
build a better mousetrap. I can create a better product that can improve the experience of using that product, because I'm getting direct feedback from these people, so that my product management team can go
Mhm.
back and take those things and turn that into either a new product or an improved version of the existing product. And then there's bottom line benefit from something like that. And
Yes.
you know what? Then Mr. Short-term salesman,
Yes. Yes.
Listen here.
you know, uh, communities aren't necessarily great for customer acquisition, but they are wonderful for customer retention
Yeah.
and loyalty and acts of advocacy. So people that like your community and have, invested some portion of themselves in that, feel like they've got a backstage pass to your brand and what you're doing, and they have an opportunity to understand how other people are using the platform. They get inspired, by how others are using your product or service. They may become thought leaders in your space,
I'm
and
thinking of my budgeting software, and
th-
they have an incredible community and all of these things. I'm like, oh yeah, yep. I answer the other people's questions. Oh yeah, I'm looking to the thought leaders for input. It's a
exactly.
budget software. It's nothing life-changing, but
So,
Right, right.
yeah.
so I was looking at, so is for instance, I don't, so I'm just kind of trying to think of a good example. But the one name that came up was Patagonia.
Oh,
Um,
sure.
and if you go on their website, they have like a menu called activism, and you can go about, so, which is kind of a weird thing to see, because basically it's their online shop and it says activism. You go like, activism, and they go, and there's a whole thing around that. And so is that an example of a community that, because to me that kind of resonates, because
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
bigger than the stuff they're selling.
For sure, for sure. So I love the way that you experienced that, because you said activism. What's that doing on the site? Like
Yeah.
curiosity right away. Like, oh, let me see what that's about. I go there, it's a landing page describing what they do for activism, and then there's an invitation call to action to get more involved.
Yeah.
It takes you into a community experience.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is what Patagonia is doing or not, but if I were architecting, I'd be thinking, oh, well, then it takes me into a community experience, which is sort of a private online space where there are other people that are committed to the same kind of social activism. I've got some sense that they have kind of this shared values system, or at least similar value system about things that, good that they're trying to do in the world. And then there are ways for me to get involved with that. There are events for me to sign up for to learn more about or become more informed about things. There are ways for me to donate my time or my money or my attention to those processes. Maybe even find stuff local to my area. Maybe there's a live group that meets from
Yeah.
time to time, and then we kind of bring that back online, and the energy sort of feeds on itself over time. Absolutely.
And there's
There's
a
a great
connection to
case for that.
stories. There's a connection to storytelling
Yeah.
as well,
Oh yeah.
yes, because
And I
they're
think
telling stories of people who are activists and doing the things, saving the planet.
especially
Yeah.
Patagonia, they do a really good job of highlighting the stories. But I think too, like, because and especially Patagonia, and I know this because I've read the book, but the founder had this core mission, right? To protect and to make good equipment that lasts longer in a attempt to protect the planet and really care for the planet. And that is a core story that everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people then deeply connected with Patagonia. So if I think if you can, and you don't always think of like a mission statement as a story, but in a way, if you do it right, it should be. Um,
But I'm cynical. So,
well, yeah, but
but so no, but because I'm thinking, yeah, right. That's just marketing. That's just like, you know,
well,
are
I mean,
they really?
I can tell you about my budget software. I mean, like, so I was looking for different softwares, right? I find this one and I saw a few comments online. This is a really great software. And of course, I was like, yeah, okay, you give it a free try. And then you start to see like they really highlighted stories like, oh, this person's financial life was kind of in shambles, but then through using this is how much more organized they are, or I paid off my student loans and in a few months instead of a few decades, or and all of these things. And by highlighting those stories and kind of, and I'd say their core thing is like everyone's human, but there is a way to be in a good space with your finances. I
So
don't know. It really,
that's your woolly mammoth,
yeah. I mean, because everyone deals with finances, so
right?
wouldn't you like to also have a good relationship with your own finances? I think,
So,
yeah.
there's another way of setting up a community, which is I was really inspired. It's been a long time ago that I was at this conference years ago, and the speaker was the founder of Threatless. And I don't know if I think Threatless is still there, but basically what they did was make T-shirts. But
Sure does. That's right. Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
so but it was a community company really, and so you make a nice design and you propose the design to the community, then the community upvotes your design, and it might get made into a
Do
T-shirt.
they have like a new design every week or something?
Oh, yeah, they have. Yeah,
Like
yeah,
that.
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah,
In
totally.
high school, I remember I'd be like, oh, it's Sunday. I have to check the website. This is really a thing for me. Okay, yeah, I
Yeah, yeah.
forgot the name though. So okay, Threadless, yes.
Threadless, they're called Threadless. And so there was someone in the audience because it was community it was really popular and big at the time. And there was someone in the audience saying, "So, what is your how do you deal with when something goes wrong in the community? Someone starts misbehaving, and how do you deal with that? Do you have like a? I think he had some jargon, some corporate jargon for this, like how do you escalate the thing to blah
Yeah.
blah. And he was
Yeah.
actually confused with. He was like, What do you mean?" And so they repeat like, "So there's something you have to. Do you have like people who take care of things that go wrong?" And he said, "No." It's a community. So if someone does something weird, so I don't have to solve it. Everybody solves it. It's a self-cleaning community, a self-cleaning organization because we own it because people are depending on it. They love it, it's their thing. And so and I was like, oh, that is so interesting. Like so he was just because even his body language was like, no, I don't know. No, I don't know.
Yeah.
Why?
I'll say that's a rarity.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's why
You-
I was asking you because I was sitting like, oh, that is amazing.
Yeah, because
That's
Oh,
sauce.
when that is you're describing a Nirvana style situation,
yeah,
Yeah.
where the culture of that community space is well understood and
mhm,
has been embraced by its members, and so they've become sort of a self-policing unit. But there's some definite danger in not having a community under management because things can really get off the rails quickly. Even with a group as wonderful as that, I'm sure they've experienced issues since then, where you've got to have some codified guidelines. I don't like to call them rules; they're guidelines, for
Mhm.
the community about like here's stuff you do, here's stuff you don't do. And if you don't do these things, if you sort of transgress those boundaries, if you push against them, you're probably going to hear from us about it. so again, there's escalation process, around that. And you need to be consistent about how you apply that.
Yeah.
I think that there are, to come back full circle, there are empathetic ways to enforce those guidelines, and to try to understand, before laying down the hammer on someone, because that sort of punitive, hierarchical, authoritative, sort of approach to things
Hmm.
has an impact on how that community feels
Hmm.
ultimately.
Hmm.
So it needs to be done in a thoughtful, empathetic way. So really kind of assuming that, like, the first time someone has come up against a violation of those guidelines, it's a private message to say,
Hmm.
"Hey, Aaron, are you okay? You having a bad day? You
Yeah,
know, I just noticed you did this thing, and I'm just a little worried about you. What's going on?"
Hmm.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
As opposed to
So,
taking the next level, which is, hey, now you kind of done this twice. This is not cool. Don't do it again.
Yeah.
ooh. So, a community needs leadership.
It does. It does. I'd say it's one of the primary reasons why communities that get launched don't succeed, if it's not under any kind of, this is a bad word, governance. Um, but I mean, there needs to be something, mindful and intentional
Yeah,
about the space. Otherwise, it can grow really wild, really fast in odd ways. Like, a lot of people use sort of the gardener metaphor. Like, you've got
Mm.
this garden and it's growing, but, like, if there's nobody tending that garden, what happens? It
right.
goes
Yeah.
crazy. Like, there's all kinds of, like, it goes past the boundaries of your property onto somebody else's property. You can't hack your way through it. Like, there's, the same kinds of things happen in unmanaged communities, because you just need somebody that's minding the store. And I think with a lot of amateur communities, and sort of what you described, Arne, as sort of the self-policing community, that's generally people who have a stake and they've been in that space for a long time, feel a sense of ownership about it, and have administrative capabilities there.
Right.
They're actually kind of taking on that role
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
the management of the space.
Yeah, exactly. So there's always a sense of leadership, or at least someone who does, is tending to the garden, is watering the plants, is yeah,
Yep.
yeah, and so obviously having a sort of a reason, or the woolly mammoth that should be there too, because otherwise there's no point of being part
Yeah.
of that. And we had that with the so we you attended the Wednesday Web Jam, which was a sort of was set up with a purpose, because when we started, it was during the lockdowns, so March 2020, and
I
I
remember
really
those.
felt
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, weird times. But so we, as a community, the sort of people who knew each other, in the world of innovation, design thinking, and what have you, we were kind of, we were stuck at home, and a little bit lost, and also because we had to do stuff online, and all of a sudden we had to work with Miro and
Yeah.
Zoom and all these things that we were like really didn't really like, but we had to. So we created a community to kind of, every Wednesday we did an experiment and try to kind of learn how to use these new techniques and tools, but also not to be lonely, and also to
Mm.
support each other, and to know that you're nowhere together. But after a while, the pandemic was kind of solved somehow. There were no more lockdowns. People started to go back to work. And so the purpose of the community, of sort of getting together, the Mammoth, basically, was replaced with other things. It wasn't there anymore. And so we started feeling this, like, okay, now it's just going to be like really difficult to get people together and to start, doing this. And so we literally decided to have a funeral for it. So we had
I love that.
a ritual
Yeah.
funeral, because I also felt like, yeah, if there's no purpose, why continue? Because
Yeah.
the mammoth is, we ate the mammoth.
I love so much of that narrative because I think there's a sense that like, oh, well, we're going to start this community and it's just going to go forever, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and that's not the case. So communities have a distinct life cycle, and it's a
Yeah.
rare one that lasts, 100 years. I mean, the oldest community on the web, as far as I know, is something called the Well, which has been around for a long time. I think it maybe originally as a bulletin board, but it's a discussion forum. Bruce Sterling and Cory Doctorow and a lot of pundits of the world will get on there and do sort of the state of the world, event every year. And I always kind of tune in and and check that out. But most communities have a distinctive beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah.
Uh, and so like a lot of brands will continue them, but I think there needs to be an acknowledgement at some point, the community starts, the community grows, it plateaus, and it either sustains, it evolves, or it declines.
Exactly.
And when you start seeing that junction point, that crossroads where you need to decide to do something, it's a perfectly valid decision to say, you know what, we're just going to let this go. And I love the way that WebJam marked that occasion, because it's important we mark chapters in our lives, that you have a funeral to remember what was the best of that
Yeah.
experience.
And it was sad, and people, it was sad, it was funny, it was sad, it was nice, and it was also, and we miss it, but it's buried. So it's not like,
Yeah.
oh, we should kind of keep doing this, or no, because we had a funeral.
Yeah,
It's gone. So it's a nice ending.
Yeah.
I think
And
that's
I think
what,
it's lovely. I
it's like knowing the moment when to leave a party, because a lot of communities, a lot of people won't have the courage to say, okay, it's time to give it a good send off. They'll just kind
Yep.
of let it peter out, and then you have some people, and it just like,
yeah, but how
yeah,
do you know? I mean, if some people still feel, no, no, it is important to me because for some reasons, how do you know when you need to stop? I mean, it's a feeling, and it's this feeling of the energy is gone. It takes more, people are not showing up anymore, and you go like,
Yeah,
yeah, but because, and we have to just kind of, I'll talk to them, or we'll send out a newsletter, and and it
yeah.
just
I
doesn't.
think you nailed it. I mean, I think humans are extremely perceptive creatures. Like we sense things even in digital spaces where we're not seeing each other face to face. And as you said, if that energy just seems to be diminishing a bit, if there's a sense of disconnection, if there are disagreements that are suddenly coming up in the community space, acrimony, that things can be kind of turning ugly in some ways, or if people just don't think the mission is the same anymore. Like I mean, I think COVID ending became sort of a nexus point for change.
Mhm.
For your group in particular, but I think for a lot of
Yeah,
online, community groups. And
totally.
so it's a point to sort of, have the conversation, bring people together. And if there are some people that still see value and don't want to stay together, well, maybe they start something new,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
sort of rededicate, like
Yeah,
write a new charter, for what that community is going to be
yeah.
next.
So now, because this is what you do, you are all about communities. We are tribal people, so in a way, we like to be part of something that's a little bit bigger than ourselves, or belong to a group, and right. And if you think about it, we belong to several groups, but there are so many communities out there. There, so is it more difficult now to kind of get people to sort of be part of a community? Because aren't people tired of this? Aren't they going like, I have so many profiles on so many different platforms, and
I'm
is it?
I'm smiling because it's not difficult to get people to join communities. It's difficult to get them to keep coming back.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so that's like the commitment level is, I've likened it to being in an all you can eat buffet, and we're like one of those Brazilian steakhouses where they
Oh
keep
yeah,
bringing
yeah,
around these tempting dishes,
Yeah.
for you're like, oh,
yeah.
I'll try a little bit of that.
Which we
And
don't have in the Netherlands, and I'm always saying
oh,
we should have one in the Netherlands.
they're just saying, oh, just try a little bit. It's wafer thin. Here you go.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You more. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
But
you have the little thing with the red and the green. You go like if it's
yeah,
green, they stop, or when it's red, they won't come to your table anymore.
and I feel this very keenly as somebody that deals with day in and day out, building community spaces, because I get involved, I get invited to more than my fair share
Yeah,
of
Mhm.
online community spaces, and I always have to make the warning statement or the caveat to say, like, look, I get invited to a lot of places. Don't expect me to be, active. This is,
Mhm.
it's like inviting me to, the party that I've already been at 15 times today, So I I think that it is more difficult than ever to get people to be committed to a
Mhm.
community space. There's more choice out there than ever. A lot of it is sort of like you almost kind of have to discover these
Mhm.
niches, like in the recesses of the dark internet. Suddenly you can find something, you can find just the right community
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
you to belong to. And if you can find that place, it's really cool. It's like, the hobbits finding Rivendell. Like, oh my gosh, this is
Yeah.
paradise. I'm going to stay here forever.
Yeah.
But
I
uh,
was thinking so one of the communities that I'm involved in is called Creative Quests, which is brilliant. But Arna has talked to the founder on another episode, and I was like, how did I get connected to this community? It's really been, life-giving to me. I really love it. Met some amazing people. It was a podcast, like so someone I followed recommended a podcast. I listened to the podcast, and on like one of the following episodes, he casually mentions this guy's name. So I happened to look him up, and I'm like, oh, his newsletter is interesting. And so, like you said, it's really like a hobbit finding
Rivendell,
this
yeah, yeah,
elusive, spectacular place. And it's
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so I think that I mean the choices are amazing, but they're a little more hidden. I think there's too much of a tendency for everybody to still live on these big, extractive, largely useless
Yeah.
social media networks. And I'm there too, but because they're kind of like the big ocean,
Mhm.
that's the broadcast medium. It's not, those aren't communities. Like I want to be really clear. X, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn are not communities. They
Mhm.
are they're big honkin' parties, for people. It's possible that a community might find a little kernel of belonging somewhere in there. There might be a Facebook group that people feel really attached to and a sense of belonging with. But to be really clear, those platforms are not designed for that. The fact that something, a place of belonging can exist in those ecosystems is is a rarity and not by design, because those places are designed to be placed, are designed like a casino. You're surrounded by flashing lights and ringing bells and people winning jackpots, and there's the next thing, for you to be distracted by in
Oh,
those spaces.
accurate. Yeah.
Do you want to build a community there? No, I really don't. Like, so I'll have people ask me, like, should I build a Facebook community? I'm like, why would you want to do that?
Well, because
And
everyone's there and it's easier to reach, more people if you are,
so
you know,
tempting. You're right. You're
right. So
right.
so
Yeah.
you're in the casino. Now I have this casino in my mind. You have this huge casino, but there's a little room to the side.
Yeah.
And you can go like, you want to come to I have a little party here going on.
But
We
but
have
you know what?
we have
It's
we
that
have a mammoth. You want to see the mammoth?
right. But it's that little room to the side. But unfortunately, someone from the main room keeps coming in and asking if you want drinks, or they're
Yeah,
telling you
and
there's
then
a
the
floor
door opens
show
and the music
starting,
comes
out there.
gushing in, and you're like, "Shut the door!" Come on.
Right. Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And the
And
lights
at
keep
some point,
flashing
Mark
around.
Zuckerberg might decide, oh, you know what? I'm not going to give you any information about that, or
Yes.
you
Yeah.
know, so
Well,
you're
that's the. I don't know if you. There's a book about this, and I was just the other day. I was listening to an interview with this author. I forgot his name, but he calls it enshittification.
or Doctorow. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that because you are caught there because you can't leave because you're Facebook, you have your
Yeah.
group with this family or the people you still know from your
Oh yeah.
childhood or school, and you can't leave, right? So they can really make it very shitty
Yeah.
for you and for everyone. before you, I will actually, but where do you go? So they have this power over you. So you're kind of sitting in this casino. You
They,
don't
they,
want
they
to
have a
be there.
network effect going on. Yeah, so like there's not going to be something that takes over Facebook in the immediate future. I mean, certainly some of those big social platforms have died an ugly death in the past, like Foursquare and um
MySpace,
and MySpace. Yeah.
MySpace, Vine, yeah.
Yeah.
Second Life.
Hmm.
Second Life, right? Yeah. So, and all of them had promise, but so it is always entirely possible that a newer, sexier version of Facebook, arrives that is not as extractive,
But
but per Cory Doctorow's enshittification principle, that too will become crappy within a couple of years, too.
That's, yeah, which is frustrating. However, do you think that communities, because I know, I mean, in a way, it's relatively new. I mean, it's very new, actually. The technology is new, the whole experience is new, and I didn't grow up with this. With having, I mean, it's what is it, 2006, 7, that we got like social media, like Twitter, and it started kind of so this idea, it's all really very new. And so, we're going to look back at this, in what, 10, 20, 30 years time, and we're going like, well, what was, so what, something changed, but maybe, so do you think that we are getting kind of fed up a little bit with that casino, with the big, this big party that we're all a little bit lost in, and there's a few people shouting all the time at you? And that we are looking for these smaller, more meaningful kind of, so for instance, I think, again, this is where we get into the Facebook meta again, but there's like WhatsApp groups, for instance, that are very, they're totally disconnected from the casino. They're like just you and your,
They're part of the invisible web, right?
yeah, exactly. Is
Yeah.
that something that we will see
I,
happen
I
more?
I think it's already happening, and I think that it's going to be accelerated uh, by a lot of the AI uh, development that's been happening as well. Because you know,
Accelerated in the sense like people want more of it and it'll happen
pe
faster.
people want more of that authentic human to human, more intimate,
Oh, right. Okay.
cozier
Yeah.
connection.
Hmm.
Because what's happening is that AI
Yeah. Yeah.
bots and LLM created content is flooding these public
Yeah.
social media spaces. And so
Right.
that enshittification it's not just advertisement and designing platforms to keep you in the casino for all the time. Now the casino's full of robots that you
And
can't tell from people,
the
right?
party is being managed by a robot. Can you
Yeah,
imagine going to a party and it's all managed by a robot? That's the one who takes care
I
of
don't
the
have to
party.
imagine it. It's already happening, right?
That is
The
exactly,
worst
but
part is you don't
that's
realize it at first. You're like, oh, these people.
yeah, no, but yeah, but just the idea that it's not like, it's not by a person, it's not done. So there's no, that's a horrible thought. That's not a party, and nobody wants to go to that party.
No,
Just
no.
maybe once, just to kind of go like, that's really weird.
I don't even want to try to stay to try the dip. I'm out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, but right. So that's a good point. So the idea of, because I think we are tribal, and we want connection, and we want real connection. That's part of our happiness, really. If you're connected to
Right.
people, right? And so lived experience, stories, real stories. I mean, an AI can tell me a story, but I don't care because it's not real. It
There's
didn't
no
have a
emotional
mother.
core to those
There's no
Yeah.
stories.
right.
Right.
It doesn't have
Yeah.
any lived experience. It's not real. It can tell me a nice story that kind of resonates with me, but it's certainly not the same as a real person telling me a life story, something that, something really happened. So that's an interesting point. So like LinkedIn, for instance. Um, and it's interesting, like my son, he's 13. So he is growing up in a world, and he literally says this, like, everything can be AI.
Yeah.
It can all be fake. Whatever he sees online, he goes like, it can just be fake. He doesn't trust anything. And
Mhm.
because he's seen fake, he knows that, and we tell him, like, it can be all. So there's a whole generation growing up with this, and I have the same feeling. So on LinkedIn, you go like, I don't know anymore. Like, hmm, it's
Yeah.
fine. So that really kills the whole thing. It kills the
It's deeply
party,
cynical, right? I mean, it kind of makes you a bit cynical
Yeah.
about all
right?
of it, and we're living in an age of cynicism now. So it means that we end up craving the real a lot more.
Which
Yeah.
means
And
there's more need for community.
I have, and like if someone, because of course you have, okay, I'm this company, I want to build a community around my company. But if you are just, I don't even know who our listeners are, so I can't say an average listener. But if you're just an average person, you're like, oh, community sounds so nice. I still haven't found a great community for me, but how would I go about building a community for myself? Like, what tips or advice would you give to someone if they're just like, okay, I love the idea of having a group that I could be a part of and a
Mhm.
shared interest or
Well, yeah. So I mean, first and foremost, you need to like I'm gonna tap Simon Sinek on the shoulder here. But you need to know why. Why do you want to do this? What do you want to get out of it? Why is this important to you? Because if you can't articulate that, you're not going to be able to get anybody else on board with your vision for it. And then as a second step, you need to, like, again, if you're just an individual who wants to build a community around whatever your interest happens to be, um, you probably want to check and make sure nobody else has built that already, because maybe you can just join that.
Mhm.
But if that hasn't been built, then you need to find maybe 5 or 6 other people that are interested in the same thing. Start a Zoom group. Start something small and casual. The technology should be the last thing that you worry about in that process. The first things you need to worry about is getting people together and helping them get on board with the vision of whatever you're trying to think or write or talk about. And that's the beginning of community building. It sounds simple. It's not because it involves sort of knowing who those other people are, and
Yeah.
and I think about any kind of effort at building a movement of any kind. It has to do with how you're articulating what that's about. I mentioned earlier in our conversation about the Milwaukee Job Camp events.
Mhm.
What I think, like for me, like that if I had to distill it down to the moment of excitement, like where the light bulb went on, like, wow, this is something interesting that hasn't happened before. It came down to a one paragraph LinkedIn message that I wrote to some colleagues in the recruiting space and HR space with me that went. It didn't go viral as a social post. It went viral in direct messages
Oh,
in
cool.
the space. And so that like it spread out to like 50, 100, 250 people. Like we had a volunteer base of over 200 people by the time we ran the first event. And it was incredible. Like the energy around that, because people it it tickled something in their brain that made them realize this hasn't happened before.
Mhm.
And I want to be a part of I could be a part of it. I could make a difference, for people in that way. And so it hit that altruistic spark that we all
Yeah.
have.
Yeah.
And it helped them because it was a little bit transgressive. So like we can't do things the same way. Job fairs suck. We're doing something a little bit different. Like I think that kernel of community building starts with the messaging, how you're framing it, and like there's some things you can't control about it, like when it's hitting the world, like
Mhm.
timing, and then just sort of the alchemy of human interaction. You never quite know if it's gonna take off or not. But the things you can do to stack the deck in your favor of being successful with that community build is really kind of nailing that message, at the outset so that you can bring in the first followers, into your idea and what you want to build.
Yeah, that is.
And I'm thinking, and there's a few people that are coming to my mind that I just think of them as kind of natural community builders. Like wherever
Mhm.
they go, they're just kind of like these little communities in their wake. And
Little magnets. They're like,
yeah, yes, but then one of them is my parents. So I'm also like, okay, well, how do what happened? Like, why didn't I inherit this?
Oh,
but I
you
think
probably
I
did.
may have. I've definitely inherited other traits of theirs. Um, but and I think the messaging, like, because my mom always keeps it so simple, like, hey, we want people to play cards with once a month. Come on over, and that's it. That's the message. And um, yeah.
I, I think that game playing mentality is a good one. So like when you said that, we didn't get into this, but this is a whole other area of nerd in my life. But like I am a lifelong role playing game kid. Like I started in the early '80s playing Dungeons and Dragons and never stopped.
Oh, yeah, cool.
But
Ah,
there's magic, not, pardon the pun, there's magic in gathering a table of people for a collaborative activity. Like
Hmm.
that, whether you're playing Monopoly or you're playing Dungeons and Dragons or Settlers of Catan or whatever, um, being able to convene people in that space and have them be entertained in a shared world for a period of time. There's something deeply immersive about
Yeah.
that. That is a kernel of community building as well.
yeah.
Mm.
So interesting to hear that um, you have so many different. So for someone, if you would make a list of all these things that you've been doing and interested in, people might say, well, that's very diverse. That's like, it has nothing to do, one has nothing to do with the other thing, right? So, you're a dancer, you're a journalist, you're Dungeons and Dragons, and then you community
I'm a
building.
weird kid.
What are you talking about? So,
Some things are direct pipelines. None of these are direct pipelines.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so is there like for you, is there like a, sort of some kind of a pattern to these things? Is there something like, does it make sense to you that all of these things are kind of within you, sort of?
Oh, I mean, in my mind, they
Yeah.
they all make sense to me. So, I mean, I think there are lessons I draw from each of those worlds, and I think the strength of what I do is made stronger by those disparate experiences that I've
Mhm.
had. I think that as I said, like I have adventures on the high seas, and like these things that I've encountered as life experiences on the way, like any of us, um, I draw lessons from them that I bring into my day-to-day workplace, and things that I do there that I think my customers value as well when I'm working with
Mhm.
them. I don't always necessarily bring in all the weird that I have, but I would much rather read books by people who have nothing to do with my industry specifically. Like I appreciate and I have read books by my colleagues who are also community strategists and do that work. I don't get as much out of them as I do from reading comic book artist and writer Grant Morrison's Super Gods book,
Yeah.
because there's this wacky fringe perspective out there from this mad Scotsman, who I love with all my heart, who brings me concepts that I don't hear anywhere in my practice.
Yeah.
And it challenges me to think about, like, well, how does that relate, to what I do? How does that concept connect? How does my experience as a dancer relate to what I do as a community convener?
But
How does my understanding of movement, affect
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
some people might feel that that makes them so, we grew up with this idea, you have to choose a trade. What are you going to be
Hmm.
when you grow up, right? And you have to kind of be focused on that, and all these, those are kind of like distractions, right? And so there's something about the way you think that is, for you, makes total sense, and I think it's, for us, it also makes total sense, because I
Yeah.
think we're quite the same. I
Multi-hyphenated people.
totally,
Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I sometimes feel that I talk about this sort of space in between, like there's all these things that all these expertises, and sometimes you dip in and out of some of these bubbles, but it's actually this space in between that is the more exciting space. But I meet some people there, like, oh, I need to find sort of my specialism and my expertise. I have to do, they feel really not at ease in that space. And I'm like, no, man, this is the cool space. This is where you go like, oh, look at that. And oh, because I can get lost in things like people try to explain, well, like there's all these wonderful YouTube videos on quantum physics.
Yeah,
I'm not smart enough, but I love it. I just love,
me
I go,
too. Yeah,
I go like,
yeah.
wow, this is so awesome. And I know my wife goes, what are you watching? I said, I have no clue, but I love it. Because there are patterns, everything is connected to everything, right? So
Mhm.
some at one point you go like, that thinking that that scientist does is the same thinking that that other person does and that I actually do, and I apply it in a different way. So there are these kind of, there are these patterns that you recognize.
Mhm.
And I think people who recognize patterns are these kind of, these maybe generalists with maybe some things that, they're,
Also highly creative. Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
I've heard the
So,
term T-shaped expertise.
yeah,
It's
yeah, 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 yeah.
you've got like the breadth of like a lot of different things, but then you've got your area of
Yeah.
deep,
Yeah.
deep knowledge and what
Yeah.
you do.
And as you were explaining that concept, Arna, I kind of had this flashback to my childhood and like high school friend groups. I would be friends with one person in like each group, like one best friend was like Miss Popular Cheerleader, and another good friend was the pothead, and another good friend was, just all Arna's laughing, but
Sorry, trying to
but
imagine this scene. Yeah. Well, what kind of
no,
birthday party would you have? Oh, yeah.
but exactly. So at my final, like, because you do like in the United States, sometimes when you graduate high school, you have a graduation party. All your friends come together.
Yeah.
Was the most random collection of people. And then when I went to university, I became part of one group of friends. So I had this kind of spread out experience, and then you had this single group of friends. And it was also very interesting just to, okay, you don't have to think about connecting everything or jumping between. It's just kind of already decided for you. And I only stayed at that university 1 year before I transferred. So I don't know how the rest of my story would have gone had I continued to be in that environment. But it's also, um, yeah, I think that I think you have to have a bit more of your own either ambition or leadership or willingness to step out because you have to steer it yourself. And I
Mhm.
think that's also very interesting because it's a pattern that we're noticing a lot then with, yeah, we'll tell you, you cracked one of the creative leadership codes, Todd.
You're part of them.
You're definitely
Yeah.
one of us. Yeah.
You're one of us. You made it. No, yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's interesting, right? That a lot of people we talk to, and again, there's a bias because we invite people that kind of probably
They sound
fits
interesting to
our
us. Yeah.
profile.
Mhm. Mhm.
But no, but this idea of people who are, they have lots of interests and lots of sort of talents, and they do all these other sort of things, and they're moving around, but they use all these things, and they're comfortable with that, and that's because they see the value of it, and also there's a little bit of a yeah, it's sort of usually they're a little bit of outliers, so they're not like they don't really fit into kind of the norm that we
Mhm.
kind of expect of people. And also the one thing that you're doing, which I think is like that's fundamental for a creative leader, is you create space for people.
Mm,
You create environments and space. So community building means creating also this psychological safe spaces or creative safe spaces or where people can kind of they're there because they want to be there, and they feel belonging, so they have to feel safe, otherwise they will never return,
Yeah,
right? So, and that is a leadership skill that I think is going to be so important for the future. So I think what you're doing, this building communities, I think that's something that is, I think, one of the most important future skills that we can see. I'm not sure if that's on the list, community building, but it should be. And so
it's
my question to you is, um, because of time, is if you think about this and think about the sort of the future, where we are now, where we've been, and where this is going, what do you think is going to happen? And That's one question, and then the last question that you can maybe blend together, I don't know, is what is the thing that you're looking forward to?
Mhm, mhm. So the future with respect to community building,
Yeah,
is that what you're
community
asking?
building, sort of the sort of how do communities,
Yeah,
or anything that you feel that maybe it's not about communities. I don't know. Maybe communities are you know doomed. I don't think so.
I don't think so. I think that this is something innate, yeah,
Yeah,
to
yeah,
our
but we
DNA.
live
I
in a
think they'll
world.
get more valuable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah,
but okay, but maybe so in the context of today, looking to the future, we could also say we are divided too much. So the communities are also separating us, right? So and we can't be one community, between every one of us. We are obviously all living on the same planet. So in a way
yeah,
we
yeah,
are, we should be really, right? But there's a tension between sort of communities and also agreeing and disagreeing, disliking, liking each other, and etc. So in that kind of context,
yeah.
what do you think?
Th- there are always opposing forces, right?
Mhm.
In in any of our social activities we have, and so the good and the bad of this is that, on the good side is we're finding more specialized, safe, cozier places to belong in digital spaces than ever before. We're getting good at it. There are at least 95, 96 platforms that I'm tracking that are created for community building and belonging. Uh, Probably many more than that I'm missing. And so like finding your home, finding your tribe is it's more possible than ever before. It's not it may not be the easiest thing to find that place in the first place, but you might take a little looking. It's not as simple as going to Google or going to your favorite AI engine and saying maybe it is, but it's a little more requires a little more intention than joining X
Mhm.
or LinkedIn. Um, but the opposing force, which is not so positive, is that we're looking at a balkanization of interest in the world. And so, yes, I can find my little tribes, and those little tribes are meaningful and helpful to me. But if I'm only with other people that have that same set of values, if I never bump into anyone else, I'm
Yeah.
I'm kind of isolating myself from other
Mhm.
forces that might help me grow in the future. And unfortunately, I think the more public commons spaces that we have right now that are represented by these tech-owned, extractive, big social spaces are not good for us, and they're not conducive to having actually meaningful or deep conversations. Their tendency is to emphasize what's exciting or emotive,
Mhm.
for us to keep us on their platform. They have a very vested interest. And so what I see in the future is a further intensification of that with some of the AI forces, that I mentioned a little bit earlier in our conversation.
Mhm.
One thing that I'm hopeful about and looking forward to is finding ways to further peel away the social barriers to connection in online spaces. So right now, by and large, at least all of the corporate and nonprofit run online communities are based centrally on text and interaction via text.
Right.
I've got my profile, I've got my posts that I'm making. Maybe I'm doing a little bit of video here and there, but
Mhm.
mostly it's text that I've got. What I'm looking forward to is the maturing of the VR, AR, XR spaces, things that I think young people are more accustomed to, like playing
Oh, yeah.
Fortnite or
Right, right, right.
being in Minecraft, where they are participating in virtual worlds as a matter of course. It's no struggle for them to have social interactions with avatars or those pieces. I think that group, as they mature and as old fuddy-duddies, find themselves retiring out of the space, it's going to be more common to have online communities that will have a sense of proximity, or like a virtual version of proximity. Like I can be face to face with you, have a conversation, other people can come in, like a sense of space, rather than these static columns of discussion threads that are out there. And I think that it'll be a healthier place for us when we get to that, because there's more responsibility. If I seem like I'm standing across from you having a conversation, it's more difficult for me to be in your face with negative opinions, or to not treat you like a person when you're in those spaces. We need that desperately right now.
Yeah.
So that's the better world I hope for.
Yeah.
I hadn't even thought of VR, AR, XR communities, so but that would be yeah.
If I look at my son when he's playing video games, when he's on his he he has his headphones on, a little microphone, and he's talking to people, and he's playing his game. And so I see that happening, and all he needs is VR glasses,
Right.
and then he's off. Yeah, no, he won't struggle to apply these things, or it will be just so easy for him, to start doing that. Yeah, totally. Yeah, interesting how that's. But for me, as an as an old man, I would
Right
like,
there with you, man.
really, yeah, but I'm like, really, do I really have to? Yeah, interesting. Yeah, so cool. Thank you so much for sharing this. Very, very inspirational.
I thought I knew a fair, like I've read a lot about communities already, and you still dropped some real gems I hadn't even thought of before. So
Oh, well, I'm very happy. Obviously, I'm always happy to talk about this topic. So
Cool.
twist my arm, right?
And also, you. So thanks for joining us and being another creative leader.